So what is the problem with baking soda?
That's a good question. First of all, we need to differentiate between the alkaline foods and the alkaline powders that sometimes we use to alkalinize the body. Baking soda, milk of magnesia, even lime, not the fruit, but the actual mineral, calcium carbonate, all these have very high pH. They're very alkaline. But we run into trouble because these powders have a very large potential to neutralize acid. They have a high alkalinity. They're not just high alkaline in pH, but they have a high alkalinity, which means when we swallow these, it can neutralize a tremendous amount of stomach acid. And we know stomach acid is important for digestion.
Yes.
Not only in our last presentation, we talked about how the stomach was the gatekeeper. Studies have found that when people are constantly on antacids and proton pump inhibitors, they have much greater risk of small bowel intestinal overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, with the really bad kind of bacteria like C. diff or other bacteria that we really don't want to have, or yeast growing in large amounts in our intestines. So that's one aspect. And the other
infections, right?
Infections is one aspect. The other aspect is also that our food is not digesting and breaking down properly. So undigested proteins are allowed to go through and potentially increase the risk of food intolerances.
Autoimmunity.
And studies have shown this consistently when looking at these high alkaline substances. Usually it's with antacids, but even a baking soda, a large amount of baking soda intake would cause these similar problems. pH reaching, I believe it's 6.5, which is a neutral pH, effectively neutralizes all pepsin in the stomach. So if a person is having some baking soda or an antacid, they are not breaking down their proteins. Pepsin is the primary digestive enzyme of the stomach.
So the baking soda that we put in our bread, that would be a detrimental, right?
Yes, even though that's a smaller amount than, I know some people are taking a tablespoon and mixing it with water and drinking it because they believe that's the way to alkalinize the body.
But super high concentrations.
Exactly, and they may feel better, a bit better initially after doing that, but it's going to long-term cause some problems. So that's really the issue with the baking soda. There are some other problems that can be engendered. B12 deficiency as well could be another issue.
How did that work?
Well, because if the stomach is not able to strip proteins away and break down proteins into smaller forms and amino acids, it's not able to cleave the cobalamin compound from other proteins that are encasing it. So you're not going to necessarily you might be eating B12 or B12 rich foods, but you're not necessarily going to be able to absorb it because it's just going to pass through unopened. It's kind of like a package that needs to be opened by the stomach acid.
Having a history of autoimmunity myself, we had a baker here, and then she was putting bacon powder, baking soda, and the bacon powder aluminum free, because people think that if it's aluminum free, it's fine.
Yes.
And then I started having my joints hurt and I couldn't. It was just causing this problem with arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. So I can tell that's the only different thing that I was doing. So I was wondering how this works.
Well, a lot of individuals that have autoimmune conditions are actually suffering from leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability. And so if you consider the fact that you're going to have more of these potential allergen proteins coming into the gut and being able to exit the gut, you're going to have more all over inflammation. The immune system is going to be activated all over the body. Not just, now of course, when food moves down, it's called chyme at this point, moves down in the small intestine, the last tail end of the small intestine called the ileum, there are immune cells there called dendritic cells that are waiting with their little feelers out to test and see if there are problem compounds coming through. And if you have an allergy to one of those proteins that didn't get digested properly, what's going to happen is the immune system is going to say, hey, it's time to start fighting again. And if you have an autoimmune condition, You don't want that to happen.
They're already activated.
Exactly. That's right.
Okay. Yeah, that's great information. And also, so what is the alternative?
For baking soda?
Yeah.
That's a good question. And that's a question that would probably have to be selective based on what a person is also allergic to. Some people will raise their bread with yeast. Now, keep this in mind. There are a lot of individuals with leaky gut that have an allergy to yeast, that they shouldn't be using it really. Crohn's disease, 70% of Crohn's patients have allergies to yeast. That being said, if a person is normal and healthy, if they're cooking their bread thoroughly, allowing no moisture to remain, they should kill that yeast that's present there in the bread.
And then also eat it after 24 hours, right? Or
yeah, 24 hours, because remember, yeast are producers of ethanol. They also produce methane or methanol at that point. And you want that to evaporate out of the bread. You don't want to eat an alcoholic beverage-laden bread.
Yeah.
So,
we also use guar gum instead of bacon powder. You know, it's not going to be exactly the same, but all of us that are gluten-free, so this is the alternative. We also can use psyllium husk. We just experimented that.
That's right.
That when you were here with your family, and your wife brought this amazing breads and waffles. Also, you can use more of flaxseed, and sometimes a combination of flaxseed and guar gum and psyllium. So these are things that we can do that we've been doing.
That's right, and the key is to for leavening bread, you want to put air pockets into it.
Yes, exactly.
So if you have one of those foods that's rich in soluble fiber, like the guar gum or even like chia seeds or flax, you want to blend it up so that and then put it in the oven right away, because you'll have these air pockets that'll get trapped there in the bread and make the bread leavened. It's called a chemical or mechanical leavening, actually.
So we don't let it sit for 15 minutes. We just put it right away. It's not like the other bread, the yeast bread.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Exactly.
But I found this passage in the Review Herald. Hard biscuits raised with soda or baking powder should never appear upon our tables. Such compounds are unfit to enter the stomach. So now that you're explaining us this, it just makes sense.